Hey guys, I'm T and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we make trendy and fun crochet tutorials twice a week. And if you haven't already, smash that like button, drop a comment below, and subscribe to join in on the fun. Today I'll be showing you how to make an awesome off-the-shoulder sweater. For this easy breezy sweater, sporty was the vibe, so I used a few stitches and stripes to mimic jerseys and kept it slightly oversized for that comfy fit. Speaking of, if you're looking for the comfiest sweaters, we've got you covered. We've got hundreds of modern crochet designs, including some of the coziest sweaters you'll ever see, with even more coming, so consider clicking the bell to subscribe and you'll never miss an upload. Also, do me a huge favor and give this video a thumbs up if you like it, or 2 thumbs down if you don't. Either way, it's a great way to show support so I can keep putting out free tutorials every Wednesday and Sunday. Now it's time to get on the show, so without further ado. For this project, any category 4 yarn will work, but I used a total of 500 grams of yarn, and that's 1100 yards if you're stateside. As for tools, a 5 and 6.5 millimeter hook, scissors, stitch markers, and a tape measure. There is a written pattern down below. Use offer code TCDDIY for a discount off any $9.99 plus order, and enter this week's pattern giveaway by telling us if you weave in your ends as you go or wait till the end. For me, I try to weave in my ends as I go, but there's usually 2 or 3 at the end that I need to sew in later. Details for the giveaway down below. We're using 3 stitches for this project, and they'll be as follows. Chain, slip stitch, single crochet, and extended half double crochet. This tutorial is for size small, but you can adjust it for your size, and we explain how to in the video, so let's get started. Getting this top started, we're first going to grab our category 4 yarn and make a slip knot. Next, we're going to grab our 5 millimeter hook, and we're all going to start by making a chain the height that we want our shoulder band to be. Now I want mine to be fairly tiny, so I'm going to start by making a chain of 4, and that's just about 1 inch or 2 centimeters. And now that we have our chain, we're going to block off that last chain. Do a chain 1. That doesn't count as a stitch, that's just our turning chain. And then into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, we're going to insert with a slip stitch to start our slip stitch row. So go ahead and insert your hook. And once we have 2 loops on our hook, we're going to yarn over, pull through both of those loops. Now there's our first slip stitch. Let's do this again. Into that following chain, insert your hook, yarn over, pull through, and then into that following chain, insert, yarn over, and pull through. And we're going to continue to put 1 slip stitch into every chain until we reach the end of the row. Now a really quick tip I have for you guys when working our slip stitches is make sure that we're not accidentally tugging on our working yarn right after we finish every stitch, otherwise the following rows can be a little bit too tight to work into. But now that we're at the end of our row, we're going to get started on our following row, which is now going to be a back loop slip stitch row. So to get that row started, we're going to chain 1. That still doesn't count as a stitch. That counts as our turning chain, and we're going to flip our work. Now to do our back loop slip stitch, we're going to find that last stitch that we have from our previous row, and we're going to insert our hook into that back loop, or the loop that's furthest away from us. And then again, once we have those 2 loops on our hook, yarn over, and pull through both of those loops. There's our first back loop slip stitch. Let's do this again. Find that next stitch's back loop, insert your hook into there, yarn over, pull through everything on your hook, and remembering not to tug too tightly on your working yarn. Now for this row 2, continue to put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. And now that we're at the end of our row 2, every row that we have for this shoulder band is going to be within the back loops, so I'm just going to get this next row started off with you guys. And it's going to be done the same way we started off the previous row, so just chain 1, flip our work, find the last stitch from our previous row, and insert your hook only in through that back loop, yarn over, pull through everything, insert your hook into that next stitch's back loop, yarn over, and pull through everything. And just continue to put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. At the end of the row, chain 1, flip our work, and then put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch again. From here, we're just going to keep repeating that row with no increases and no decreases until we get a shoulder band that can stretch around our shoulders. And we do want to make sure that we're stretching it as if we're wearing it. And we also want to make sure that we end on a number of rows that is in multiples of 4. So go ahead and get that all finished up, and then I will meet you guys back. Alright, so I am back and my shoulder band is all finished up. I have a total of 132 rows, and this is just about 22 inches or 56 centimeters, and that's unstretched. Now what we're going to do from here is seam our two ends together, so let's get that started. We are first going to start by placing our ends on top of each other, making sure that our band isn't twisted. We're going to be inserting our hook into the corner stitch of both the front and the back panel, and then we're going to do an outside loop slip stitch seam. So getting started on our outside loop slip stitch seam, we're going to yarn over and pull through everything since our hook goes in through the corner loops. Now from here, we're going to be inserting our hook into that front panel's first available stitches front loop. So this is my first stitch that I have right here. I'm going to insert my hook in through that front loop, and then I'm going to find that first stitch into my back panel. This is my first stitch into my back panel right here, and I'm going to insert only in through that back loop. Once we have those 3 loops on our hook, we're just going to yarn over and pull through all 3 of those loops. And we're doing that so that it looks like an extra slip stitch row. Let's do this again. Into that next stitch into the front panel, insert only into that front loop. And then into the back panel, insert your hook only into that back loop, yarn over and pull through. And that's it. We're going to continue to do our outside loop slip stitch seam until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. And now that we have made our way all the way down with our slip stitch row, we're now going to single crochet across the bottom of our shoulder band. So to get that started, we're going to do a chain 1. We're going to flip our work over, and we're going to be putting 1 single crochet into every side slip stitch row. So just to get this started, we're going to find that first available side row that we have, and this is mine right here, which is this raised row. So I'm going to find that top loop and insert my hook into there with just 1 single crochet. This is my next side row, which is this divot. So I'm going to find that top loop and insert my hook into there with just 1 single crochet. And that's it. Let's just do one more set together. So this is my next side row. I'm going to insert my hook into that top loop with a single crochet. And then this is my next side row that I have right here, which is this divot. So I'm going to insert my hook into there with just 1 single crochet. And that's it. We're going to continue to put 1 single crochet into every side row, slip stitch into that chain space that we made, and then do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then I will meet you back to get started on the front panel. Alright, so I'm back and I've just finished up the single crochet row along the bottom of our shoulder band. And right before we get started on the front panel, we're going to need to insert our stitch markers into the middle stitches that we have so that we can separate our front and back panel. So the first one is going to be fairly easy. We're going to grab our first 2 stitch markers and then insert them on either side of our tail end. And then all we're going to do from there is count out the 2 middle stitches that we have from our first 2 stitch markers that we did, and then insert them into there. You should have 2 middle stitches, so go ahead and insert your stitch markers into there. Now if you guys have my numbers, I've inserted my stitch markers into the 66th stitch from the 2 stitch markers that we inserted into the tail end. And now that everything is evenly split up, we're ready to get started on the front panel. So go ahead and set this off to the side and grab your 6.5mm hook. Alright, so getting our front panel started, we're all going to grab our category 4 yarn. We are now going to grab our 6.5mm hook, and we're all going to start by making an odd number chain that reaches from the top of our shoulder down to where we want the bottom of this sweater to be, keeping in mind that we will have a bottom band as well. So I want my sweater to be roughly 21 inches or 54 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain of 75. So now that we have our chain, we are going to block off that last chain and do a chain 3 to get started on our first extended half double crochet row. That chain 3 doesn't count as a stitch, we just want the height, and that is our turning chain. And from here, all we're going to do is yarn over and then insert our hook into that chain that we blocked off, or the 4th chain from our hook. Now we should have 3 loops on our hook, so we're going to yarn over, pull through that first loop. Once we have 3 loops again, we're going to yarn over and pull through just that first loop on our hook to get another 3 loops on our hook. And then once we have these final 3, we're going to yarn over, pull through all 3 of those loops. And that is our extended half double crochet. Let's do this again. Yarn over, insert your hook into that following chain, insert your hook, pull through. Once we have these 3 loops on our hook, we're going to yarn over, pull through the first loop to get 3 loops on our hook again, and then yarn over, pull through all 3. Let's do this just once more. Start with yarn over, insert your hook into that following chain, pull through to get 3 loops, yarn over, pull through that first loop, yarn over, pull through all 3 loops, and continue to put 1 extended half double crochet into every chain. So we made our way all the way down with our extended half double crochet row, and now the first row in our 3-row repeat is all finished up. Now the second row in our 3-row repeat is going to be a single crochet mesh stitch row, so let's get that started. We're going to chain 1 and flip our work. That chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch, that's just our turning chain. And then from here, we're going to insert our hook into that first stitch that we have from our previous row. So insert your hook into there with 1 single crochet. And then from there, we're going to do a chain. You're going to skip that following stitch and then insert your hook into the top of that following stitch. So we're going to skip 1 into the next, insert with a single crochet. We have just formed a chain space, and that is our mesh detail. Let's do this again. We're going to chain 1, skip the following stitch, into the next, a single crochet, forming a chain space, which is our mesh detail again. Let's do this just once more. Chain 1, skip the next stitch, into the following stitch, a single crochet, and continue to do this until we reach the end of the row. We are now at the end of our row 2, and the second row for our 3-row repeat is all finished up. And the third row is going to be a repeat of our second row, so another single crochet mesh stitch row. So to get that started with you guys again, chain 1, flip our work, and then into the last stitch from our previous row, which should be a single crochet, we're going to insert our hook into the top of that stitch with a single crochet. And just like the previous row, we're going to chain 1, skip the following stitch, which should be a chain space, and then single crochet into that following stitch, which should be a single crochet. So skip 1, into the next stitch, insert with a single crochet, and that is our chain space, which is our mesh detail. Let's do that again. Chain 1, which is our chain space, into the top of that next stitch, which should be a single crochet, 1 single crochet on top of that, and continue to do this until we reach the end of the row. All right, so we are back, and we should all have a total of 1, 2, 3 rows. Now we have our 3-row repeat, and all we're going to do is start our row 4 with our extended half double crochet, and then our 2 mesh stitch rows after that, and then we're going to continue to do that until we get the shoulder portion that we want. I'm just going to get started with that following extended half double crochet row with you guys. So start with a chain 3, flip your work. Now we're going to yarn over, preparing for an extended half double crochet, and then insert your hook into that last stitch from our previous row, which should be a single crochet, pull through. We're going to yarn over, pull through that first loop, yarn over, pull through all 3. Let's do just one more. Yarn over, insert your hook into that following stitch, which should be our chain space. So just go ahead and insert your hook into that entire gap, pull through that first loop, pull through all 3. And that's it. Continue to do an extended half double crochet into every stitch. At the end of this row, chain 1, flip our work, do 1 mesh stitch row. At the end of that row, chain 1, and then do another mesh stitch row, and then repeat. Now this shoulder portion is going to be a repeat of these 3 rows with no increases and no decreases until this reaches from about 2 inches past the tip of your shoulder to the base of your neck. And I'll meet you back right after an extended half double crochet row. So my shoulder portion is all finished up. I have a total of 19 rows, and my width is just about 6.5 inches or 16 centimeters. And now we can connect it into the shoulder band. So what we're going to do is insert our hook into any one of our stitch marker stitches. It doesn't matter which one. Just going to insert And then from here, all we're going to do is yarn over and pull through everything on our hook to make sure it's nice and secure. Now that our shoulder is connected to our shoulder band, we can get started on the following row that we have in our row sequence, which is a single crochet mesh stitch row. So right after that one slip stitch, we're going to flip our work and then do our mesh stitch row, making our way all the way down. So just as a refresher, we're going to insert our hook into that first stitch from our previous row and insert with a single crochet. Next, we're going to chain 1, skip the following stitch, and then single crochet into the next stitch. And that's it. Continue to do this until we reach the end of the row. At the end of the row, chain 1, do our second mesh stitch row in our 3-row repeat, and then I will meet you back once we make our way back down to our shoulder band. So we've made our way all the way down with our mesh stitch row and all the way back up. We're now going to connect it into the base together. So what we're going to do is find that next available stitch into the base and then just slip stitch into there to connect this second mesh stitch row that we just finished. Now the following row in our row sequence is going to be an extended half double crochet row. So we're going to need to slip stitch into those next 2 available stitches into the base to get the height that we need. So into that next stitch, I'm going to insert with 1 slip stitch, and then into that following stitch into the base with my second slip stitch, and flip our work. Now we still aren't doing any increases or decreases, so we're going to make our way all the way down with our extended half double crochet row. When we reach the end of the row, we're going to continue with our 3-row repeat. So at the end of the row, chain 1, and then do our mesh stitch row, making our way all the way back up towards the base. So our extended half double crochet row and our mesh stitch row, making our way all the way back up, is all finished. I'm going to show you guys how we're going to connect it into the base again. So when working our mesh stitches into the base, we're only going to slip stitch up that next available stitch because these rows are short. So slip stitch up that stitch, and then our following row is going to be another mesh stitch row. So slip stitch up that following stitch, flip our work, and then do our mesh stitch, making our way all the way down. And then at the end of the row, chain 3, flip our work, and then do our extended half double crochets, making our way all the way up. And I'll meet you at the base to show you how we're going to connect our extended half double crochet rows into the base. Alright, so we've made our way all the way back up with our extended half double crochet row. And now that we worked our way up with it, we're going to show you guys how to connect this side. So all we're going to do is count up the next 2 available stitches because we need the same height as this extended half double crochet row. So we're going to count up 1, count up 2. Into that second stitch into the base, all we're going to do is slip stitch into there to close it off. And then that's it. From here, it's going to be a repeat of our 6 previous rows. Now we're still going to do our 3-row repeat. So our 2 mesh stitch rows and our 1 extended half double crochet row, but they are connected into the base the same way that I just showed you guys. And we don't have any increases or decreases to do for this section. So just continue to do this, making our way all the way until we reach our next stitch marker, and then I'll meet you back. Alright, so I've just made my way all the way across my band to my next stitch marker right over here. And now all we're going to do is the following row in our row sequence and just continue on with our 3-row repeat until we have the same amount of shoulder rows as this side over here. So just to talk you guys through it, my last row that I did was my second mesh stitch row. So from here, since I worked into my stitch marker stitch, I am now going to do a chain 3, flip my work, and then do an extended half double crochet row, and then 2 mesh stitch rows right after that, and then repeat. Now, if you guys ended on an extended half double crochet row, what you guys are going to do, it doesn't matter if you end on the top or along the bottom, is you're going to chain 1, flip your work, and then start this with your mesh stitch row. And you are still going to be doing the 3-row repeat for the same amount of rows that we have for the other shoulder portion. But go ahead and get that done with no increases and no decreases. Once when you have the same amount of rows, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then I will meet you back so that we can do the back side. I am all finished up doing the rows for my shoulder portion. I did do a chain up of 1 and cut, and now all we're going to do is the back panel, which is actually going to be done exactly the same way as our front, so I'm just going to talk you guys through it. So doing our back panel, we're going to start by making the same chain count that we did when we started off this section. We're going to do an extended half double crochet row, and then 2 mesh stitch rows for the same amount of rows that we did for the shoulder portion. And then we're going to work our way all the way across our band until we reach the next stitch marker. The only difference is that now we're going to be inserting our hook into that next available stitch that we have into the band. So we're just going to insert it into the stitch, work our way all the way across, and then we're going to finish it off with our second shoulder portion, which is just the same amount of rows as our first shoulder portion, and then do a chain up, a one, and cut, and then I'll meet you back. Alright, so I am back and I have just finished up both my front and my back panel, and now we're going to seam the shoulders together. So the first thing we're going to do is insert our hook into the stitch that we have that's into the shoulder band that both the front and the back panel are coming out of, and we're inserting it into the shoulder band so that we don't have any gaps when we seam it. Once our hook is in through that stitch, we're going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, and then do a chain up of 1 to secure. We're going to be putting 2 single crochets into every side extended half double crochet row, and then 1 single crochet into every side mesh stitch row. And we're going to be working into both the front and the back panel, so let's get that started. Now my first side row that I have right here is a side extended half double crochet row. So I'm going to find that top loop and insert my hook into there, and then I'm going to find that first side row that I have within the back panel. This is mine right here. I'm going to insert into there, and then put 1 single crochet into there. Now, since this is a side extended half double crochet, I'm going to be putting 1 more single crochet into that side top loop. And this one should be a little bit easier since they should be gathered already. So just insert your hook into that same gap into the front panel, and also into that same gap into the back panel, and then single crochet. Now there's our side extended half double crochet. Now let's do our side mesh stitch rows. Now this is my following row, which is a mesh stitch row. So I'm going to find that top loop and insert my hook into there. I'm going to find my following row into the back panel, which mine is a mesh stitch row as well. So I'm going to insert my hook into there, and then single crochet, just putting 1 into there. And then I'm going to be putting 1 single crochet into the next side mesh stitch row. So find that top loop into the front, find the following top loop into the back panel, and then single crochet them together, and then that's it. We're going to continue on with the stitch sequence, making our way all the way down, and we don't have any more stitches left. Do a chain up, a 1, and cut, and then repeat everything we just did here on the other side. Alright, so I've just finished up seaming my shoulder, and now we're ready to seam our sides. So the first thing we're going to want to do is make sure that our work is still flipped wrong side out, meaning the seam that we have for the shoulder is still along the outside. Then right after that, we're going to be inserting our stitch marker into the stitch where we want our sleeve to start. Now I've inserted my stitch marker into the 25th stitch from the top. That's just about 6 inches or 15 centimeters. And now from here, we're going to insert our hook into the bottom corner stitch of both the front and the back panel, and then we're going to do a single crochet seam. So now that our hook is into the corner stitch of both the front and the back panel, we're going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, and then do a chain up of 1 to secure. And now we're going to single crochet, making sure we're working into both the front and the back panel at the same time. So find that first available stitch into the front panel, insert your hook, find that next available stitch into the back panel, insert your hook into there, and then we're going to single crochet them together. Let's do this again. Into that next stitch into the front panel, insert your hook, into that next stitch into the back panel, insert your hook into there, and then single crochet them together. And then that's it. We're going to continue to do this until we reach our stitch marker, and then when we do a chain up, a 1, and cut, and then repeat everything we just did here on the other side. So now that everything is all seamed up, we're ready to get started on our sleeve. So how that's going to work is start off making sure that our work is flipped right side out. Then we're going to insert our 6.5mm hook into the stitch that we have that's nearest to our side seam. Insert our yarn onto our hook and pull through. Now all we're going to do from here is our 3-row repeat that we've been doing for the body, so it's going to be fairly simple. So right after this, we're going to want to do a chain 3. Now the chain 3 doesn't count as a stitch, we just want the height. So there's 1, 2, and 3. So from here, this first row is going to be pretty simple. We're going to make our way all the way around, putting 1 extended half double crochet into every stitch, and then I'll meet you back when we don't have any stitches left. Alright, so our first extended half double crochet row is all finished up. We don't have any more stitches left, and I'm going to show you how we're going to close off this row and get started with our next mesh stitch row. So we do need to connect our last extended half double crochet to our chain 3 that we made when we started off this row. So all we're going to do is slip stitch into that third chain. So let's start by counting up 1, 2, 3 chains. Insert your hook into that third chain. When we have those 2 loops on our hook, yarn over and pull through both of those loops. And that is how we are always going to close off our extended half double crochet row. Now following our row sequence, our following row is going to be a mesh stitch row. So what we're going to do is start with a chain 2. Now that first chain does actually count as a stitch. That's going to count as our first single crochet, because you know how we typically single crochet into that first stitch. And then we're going to do a second chain. That's going to count as our chain. After we have our 2 chains, we're going to flip our work. And then once when our work is flipped, we are going to single crochet into the second stitch from our hook. So we're going to skip that following stitch and then into that next one, insert with a single crochet, and that leaves us with a chain space, which is our mesh detail. Let's do this again. Chain 1, skip a stitch, and then single crochet. So this part is going to be per usual. Continue to do this until we don't have any more stitches left. And then I will meet you back so that I can show you how we're going to seam it together. Alright, so we've made our way all the way around with our second row, and we need to close off this row together. So since I said that the first chain counts as a stitch, we're going to be inserting our hook into that first chain that we made when we started off this row with a slip stitch. So just find that loop, yarn over, and pull through everything. And now that this row 2 is nice and connected, let's get started on row 3. So getting started on row 3, we're just going to do a chain 1 now, and then flip our work. And now that our work is flipped, getting started on our row 3, this mesh stitch row is going to be the same way that we start all of our other mesh stitch rows, because the last stitch that we have from our previous row is a single crochet, and all of our single crochets is going to be on top of the previous mesh stitch row's single crochet. So we did do a chain 1, flipped our work, and we're going to find that last stitch from our previous row, which is a single. I'm going to insert our hook into there with 1 single. We're going to chain 1, skip that following stitch, which should be a chain space from our previous row, and then single crochet into that following stitch. And we have just formed our first chain space and our detail for our mesh stitch. Now continue to do this, making our way all the way around, and then I will meet you back. Alright, so we've made our way all the way around with our second mesh stitch row. We're going to slip stitch it into that chain space that we made when we started off this row to close it off. So just insert your hook, yarn over, and pull through everything. And now from here, this may be a little bit different for everyone, so let's just talk you guys through it. So for my sleeve, I have a total of 3 rows done, and that is 1 set of our 3-row repeat. Now we're going to continue to repeat these 3 rows with no increases and no decreases until we're ready to switch out our colors, if we're switching out our colors. Now for those of you that would like to switch out your colors like how we did, we are going to meet you guys back right after our second mesh stitch row, after we have the length with our primary color that you want, and then I will meet you guys back. Now I actually have the length that I want, and I'm actually ready to switch out to my secondary color. But right before we do that, since we ended on our second mesh stitch row, we're just going to have to do 1 single crochet row along the edge, just so that when we introduce our secondary color, it's nice and clean. So if and when you are ready to switch out your colors, we should have slip stitched into that last chain space from our second mesh stitch row, chain 1, and then just make your way all the way around, putting 1 single crochet into every stitch. When we reach the end of the row, slip stitch into our chain 1 space, and then do a chain up of 1 and cut. Alright, so I am back. I've just finished up my single crochet row along the bottom, and I did do a chain up of 1 and cut because I'm ready to switch out to my secondary color. So all we're going to do from here is insert our 6.5mm hook into any one of these stitches that we have, and then we're just going to repeat. So an extended half double crochet row, 2 mesh stitch rows, and then if you wish to switch out your color again after that set, a single crochet row. But if you don't plan on switching out your colors, then you can just leave it to our regular 3-row set, and then just continue with that until we're ready to do our cuff. So I already have one of my sleeves all finished up, so I'm just going to show you guys what I did really quickly. Now, as you guys can see, I have 2 stripes with my secondary color. Now, each of these sets that I have is in sets of 4. Now, for this 1, 2, 3, 4 sets that I have, they all end with a single crochet because we want our following color that we're switching it out to be nice and clean once we introduce it. But once when we have our solid portion, we don't need to do our single crochet row anymore. So for me, from here all the way down, I just have an extended half double crochet, 2 mesh stitch rows, and then a repeat of those 3 rows. So go ahead and make an entirely striped sleeve, just 2, just 1, no stripes, whatever you guys want to do. But go ahead and get that all finished up, and then I will meet you guys back so we can get started on the cuff together. Alright, so I am back and the length of my sleeve is all finished. Now I have a total of 37 rows and my width is just about 13.5 inches or 34 centimeters. And now we're going to start working on our cuff. And since we do want this to cinch for the cuff, we're going to start with a single crochet row while doing a decrease. So all we're going to do is do a decrease of 2 into every stitch that we have. So let's just get that started. Start by inserting your hook into that first available stitch from our previous row. Pull through into that next stitch, pull through all 3. There's our decrease. Let's do this again. Into that next stitch, pull through, into that following stitch, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 3. And that's it. Continue to decrease, making our way all the way around, and I will meet you back. I have just single crocheted my way all the way around the bottom of my sleeve, preparing for my cuff, and now we are all done. Now we're going to make a chain the length that we want our cuff to be. Now I want my cuff to be just about 3 inches or 8 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain of 13. And now that we have our chain, we're going to slip stitch back down our chain all the way to the base. So start by blocking off that last chain and do a chain 1. Into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, insert with a slip stitch. So insert, yarn over, pull through everything on our hook. That's our slip stitch. Let's do another one. Insert your hook into that following chain, and when we have those 2 loops in our hook, just yarn over, pull through both of those loops. And that's it. We're going to continue to put 1 slip stitch into every chain, and just as a really quick tip, after we finish every stitch, make sure that we're not tugging too tightly on our working yarn, otherwise the following stitch can be really hard to work into. So continue to do this until we reach the base. And now that we've slip stitched all the way down our chain, we're going to need to connect it into the base. So all we're going to do is find that next available stitch that we have, insert your hook, and when we have those 2 loops on our hook, just yarn over and pull through both of those loops, connecting it with a slip stitch. And we do need to work our way up to the next row, so find that next available stitch into the base, insert your hook, yarn over, pull through everything with another slip stitch, and then we're going to flip our work and make our way all the way down, putting 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. So just to do that together, we're going to find the last stitch from our previous row, and then insert only in through that back loop, or the loop that's furthest away from us, and then we're going to yarn over, pull through everything. Let's do that again. Into that next stitch's back loop, insert your hook, yarn over, and pull through everything. And that's it. Continue to put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. And now that we're at the end of our row 2, we're going to get started on our row 3. Since we're along the outside, we're just going to do a chain 1, flip our work, and then continue to put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and I will meet you back at the base just to connect it together once more. And now that we're back down at the base, let's slip stitch it together. To connect it into the base, find that next available stitch, insert your hook into there with a slip stitch to close off this row, and then just to work our way up to the next row, slip stitch up that next stitch, flip our work, and then continue to put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. At the end of this row, chain 1, flip our work, and then we're just going to keep repeating these 2 previous rows with no increases and no decreases until we don't have any more stitches left to work into the base. And then I will meet you back to show you how we're going to seam our cuffs. Alright, so we've just made our way all the way around with our back loop slip stitch rows. We don't have any more stitches left to work into, so now we're going to seam it. And this is going to be an outside loop slip stitch seam, so the same seam that we did for the shoulder band. So let's get that started. Start by making sure that our work is flipped right side out. Then we're going to find that first available stitch from the front panel and insert your hook only in through that front loop. So we're going to insert our hook in through that front loop, and then into the back panel, find that first stitch and then insert only in through that back loop. And then when we have those 3 loops on our hook, just yarn over and pull through all 3. Now let's do that again. Into that next stitch into the front panel, insert your hook in through that front loop. Next stitch into the back panel, insert in through that back loop, yarn over and pull through all 3. And continue to do this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. Do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then once we have that, repeat everything that we just did here on the other side. So both of our sleeves are all finished up, and we are ready to finish off this sweater with our bottom band. So since this is pretty wide, we are going to be switching back out to our 5mm hook, and now we're going to single crochet along the bottom of our piece. And how we're going to do that is by putting 1 single crochet into every side extended half double crochet row, and then a decrease of 2 single crochets into each of the 2 mesh stitch rows that we have. So let's just get that started together. Let's start by inserting our 5mm hook into any one of our side rows that we have along the bottom. Insert your yarn onto your hook, pull through, and then do a chain up of 1 to secure. So let's all start by finding our first side row, which is this mesh stitch row right here. I'm going to insert my hook into that top loop, yarn over, and pull through. Now I'm going to insert my hook into the top of that following side mesh stitch row, yarn over, pull through, and then once we have those 3 loops on our hook, we're going to yarn over and pull through all 3 of those loops, and that's our first decrease of 2 single crochets. Now my next side row is a side extended half double crochet row. We're just going to be putting 1 single crochet into the top of that row. So insert your hook into that top loop with just 1 single crochet. And then that's it, so let's just do 1 more set together. My next 2 rows are side mesh stitch rows, so find the top loop into that following row, pull through, find the top loop into that next row, which should be our second mesh stitch row, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 3, and then our side extended half double crochet row, just insert with 1. And we're going to continue to do this, making our way all the way around and then slip stitch into our chain space. So our single crochet row along our bottom band is all finished, and now we're going to make a chain the length that we want our bottom band to be. Now I would like for my bottom band to be just about 4 inches or 10 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain of 20. Now that we have our chain, we're going to be doing a back loop slip stitch band, so the same band that we did for the cuff. So just to get this started, we're going to block off that last chain, do a chain 1, and then into the chain that we blocked off with a second chain from our hook, we're going to insert our hook with a slip stitch. So insert, yarn over, and pull through everything, remembering not to tug too tightly on our working yarn. And continue to put 1 slip stitch into every chain. Now that we've made our way all the way down with our slip stitch row, we are next going to connect it into the base. So start by finding that next available stitch, insert our hook with a slip stitch to close off this first row, and then to work our way up to the next row, slip stitch up that next stitch into the base, flip our work, and then put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. And then at the end of the row, chain 1, flip our work, and continue to put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and keep repeating those 2 rows with no increases and no decreases until we don't have any more base stitches left to work into, and then I will meet you back to remind you how we're going to do our seam. I've made my way all the way around with my back loop slip stitch rows. I don't have any more stitches left to work into the base, so now we're going to seam it. And this seam is going to be the same seam that we did for the cuff, so an outside loop slip stitch seam. So to finish up this piece, make sure that it's still flipped right side out, and then we're going to start by inserting our hook into that first available stitch's front loop. So we're going to insert our hook into that front loop only, and then we're going to find that first stitch into the back panel and insert into that back loop only, and then when we have those 3 loops on our hook, just yarn over and pull through all 3. So it's the same seam that we did for the cuff and the collar, so go ahead and get this all finished up, and then I will meet you back. So my bottom band is all seamed up and we are all done. The last thing we're going to have to do is weave in all of our ends. And there you have it. Hope you guys enjoy the tutorial. Check us out on Instagram, Pinterest, or Twitter. Those links are down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And I'll catch you on the next one. Bye!